All right. So let's go ahead and jump into RPR. It is 9:05. I'm going to let you guys get a little bit of extra information about RPR. So how many of you guys, just by show of hands, have already used RPR before? Oh, just two of you guys. Okay. Oh, three. Hey, there we go. So RPR is actually a tool that you guys can find linked directly on your MLS portal. This does not mean that it is actually a member benefit of the MLS. This is actually something that's being provided to you by the National Association of Realtors. Now, interestingly enough, the National Association of Realtors provides you guys access to this no matter what MLS you're a part of, no matter what association you're a part of, which means that if you do end up changing states, changing MLSs, you'll always have access to RPR. As long as you are a licensed realtor, you'll be able to get into this system. So just keep that in mind whenever we're going through some of this information, that this is actually going to be linked to our MLS and some extra information, that this is a tool that you will have access to everywhere that you go as a realtor. Now, I wanted to point out that RPR actually stands for the Realtor Property Resource. Now, this is a tool that was being developed by the National Association of Realtors as a way to try and funnel a lot of the questions that any of the buyers, sellers, anybody that you guys are working with, any of your clientele can use you as the most reliable source of information for any real estate questions they have. So when they started developing this, they had a wholly owned subsidiary corporation that was going to be putting together the information. And what they've done is they've actually compiled data. It's a national database, which means that it actually will not require you to be in a specific area. Like for instance, in our MLS's situation, we do have information for listing data throughout all of Eastern Oklahoma. We've got some that are crossing over into the border into Kansas and Arkansas. We've got plenty that are a little bit further into the center or the west side of the state. But that's about it. It's really going to depend on who's put what information into our system. RPR, because they are actually nationwide, can actually gather information about every property in the entire country. And in fact, at the moment, I believe that they said that they are at over 160 million US properties have their information in our system or in RPR. Now, this is also going to include several sources that are not going to be ones that you can find elsewhere, or at least not find them easily. This is going to have reports and information on each of these pieces of property from over 350 different sources. Now, what that means is that when you guys come into RPR, let's say that you have a client that's looking for a very specific piece of information. Maybe they want to know what the rainfall is or what the population demographics are like, or what the economic situation is in a specific area, if they're maybe like an investor, for instance. All of that information can be found in here. And there's even options to create reports so that you can actually get that information into the hands of your client in a cohesive manner. So we're going to be covering a lot of both the searching elements of how to actually find properties, what to do with that information, as well as creating some reports both for buyers and for sellers. Now, one of the important things to recognize when we're discussing RPR is that RPR is a tool that's meant only for realtors. Now, what that means is that you will not have a public front end. So for instance, as you guys may have noticed, Matrix ended up going through a massive change recently where they started presenting the one home option. So that whenever you sent a listing off to someone, if you found something that they liked, you can send this information over to them by way of an email. And that will actually give them access to a portal that they can view more listing data. RPR is not meant to function like that. It is meant to be the realtor's property resource, not your client's property resource. So it's not too bad. If you guys end up having any questions that maybe aren't being answered elsewhere, if you do end up having something that you can't seem to find information on, maybe you guys wanted to learn something about the commercial properties because maybe that's not your forte, or maybe you're looking for data on when the property was built and you don't want to have to sign into Realist, for instance, you guys can come into RPR. There's a mobile app, and there's also a lot of the interface that we're going to be covering today that allows you to just dive directly into a specific property and find out any piece of information you could practically ever want. Now, because this is being presented as the realtor's choice, you guys will become the lightning rod that Zillow, Trulia, and a lot of other alternative, at least client-facing portals will actually allow them to go to. So we'll be trying to cover how that's actually going to play out for you and who to deal, who will need what kind of information over time. So we're going to focus in, at least in the first half of class, on working with a specific type of client. We're going to be talking about working with a buyer. And then in the latter half of class, after we take a 10-minute break, we're going to be talking about the working with a seller. So let's go ahead and start off with some basic information about this homepage that we're looking at here. I've kind of been scrolling up and down, but we have a search function built into the top up here. We also have our little menu, navigational menu. We'll be discussing that a little bit more later. We've got our shortcuts. The shortcuts are only going to be present on this home page, but they're quick and easy links to try and get you into specific functions that you may need. If you guys are not familiar with the home page at all, if you guys haven't been in before, you do have the tour homepage option, which will give you guys a little bit of an overview of everything. But just so you guys are aware of what's happening on here, we have a My Markets section. I actually got to go through and create which of the areas here are actually going to be present. And whenever you click on one of these, it effectively works the same way that Matrix's Hot Sheets and Market Watch works. So for instance, if I were to switch this over to, let's say, Durant, it'll change my map. It'll show me what's for sale in the area, what's for lease, any price changes, what's pending, closed, etc. And it shows all of those dots on the map for me. Now I can click onto any of these to see if I can find out more about, let's see, this for sale one right here. I can click on it, see the land that's available. Oh, looks like we got a property here. We've got one out here, almost silo, it looks like. So there's a lot of different options just from this home page. We're going to be discussing when we talk about our profile settings, how to add all of these market watch areas so that when you come in here to the My Markets area in RPR, you can just dive right into any of the properties that are open. Now, somebody asked a question in chat. We do have the properties in here that are going to be shown for a specific amount of time. When we get into our settings, I'll show you guys where you guys can make adjustments to how far back this information will be pulling from. A little further down, we have the listings that are going to be for myself. I've got my current listings or any previous listings. As you guys can see, I don't have any current or previous just because I actually literally can't put in any listings that are real. We do have the My Properties section where we can save specific properties. One of the cool things about this is that you guys can give them names or just leave them with their regular address. But if you have somebody that's maybe specifically looking for a certain kind of property and you find one that actually might work for them, you can save that property, give it a name, and then you can jump back into it really quickly and easily. It also keeps track of all of the properties that you view. So for instance, if you stumble upon something that might be of interest to a different client, but you're currently working on other projects, you can always just click on this recently viewed properties and jump back to whichever one it was that you found. Now, interestingly enough, you guys notice that there's these little icons here that actually indicate where it was that we were viewing this particular property from. In this case, if you see this little screen icon, make this a little bit larger. If you see this little screen icon, this is indicating to you that this was viewed on a computer. Meanwhile, if you guys have actually been looking up something on your phone, it'll actually show this little smartphone icon. There's also going to be some reports, which we'll be covering extensively later, as well as the notes. I'm going to be talking a lot about this when we discuss the seller side of things. So we'll take a look at those a little bit more extensively when the time comes. We also have our My Searches. which allows us to save any searches that we've constructed in case you guys want to create something that's a little bit more catered than the uh, My Markets section that we see up at the top here. You guys can actually create a search with a variety of different methods, clarifying the same kind of details that you guys might if you were using Matrix, including map searches. So if you guys wanted to define a specific map area and then construct your search within there, you can actually save that search and jump right back into it later. There's also the recent searches, which allows you guys to track down information. And again, it's always going to keep track of what device you've actually done this on. So if you were on your phone or on a computer, it'll recognize that and let you know what it was. Now, a little further down on the homepage, just the last couple things here, we do have a Facebook group. There is a 24/7 phone number. Notice there are no hours of operation in here. What we're looking at is literally just a phone number that's available anytime you guys might need them. I was really happy to find that out. I've called them several times just to see if I could get some assistance with certain things. And there is also a learning tool down here as well. So if you guys want to find out more about anything, interestingly enough, while we're going through all of this, there's a couple different buttons up here at the top that do effectively the same things. You don't have to jump all the way back to your homepage just to find them. There is a learning tool that actually allows you to contextually learn about whatever it is. This is going to be taking the context of whatever page you happen to be on and then curating a list of tools that are going to be available for you. So we've got the My Market section. There's a 1:41 long video specifically about that. And there's also an Explore the Homepage video that you guys can watch. But all of these videos are going to change depending on where I've actually moved. So whenever we navigate over here to the profile to get that up to date, you'll notice that our page selection is going to be different. It's going to have curated videos and tutorials, guides, etc., that are going to be specifically covering wherever you are. So it makes it really easy to learn more about whatever you guys are doing. And there's also some buttons down here at the bottom to view more ways to learn, as well as search quick answers in case you guys maybe happen to think of something that you didn't need on this page, but you wanted to find out more. You can jump into that. In addition, we've got that 24/7 phone number down here on the homepage, but there's always going to be this help button up at the top of the screen where you have that phone number there. There's also the live chat, which is fantastic. Ever since they introduced this, this is actually my primary method of reaching out to them. And then there's also the training area, which is similar to the more ways to learn, etc. So before we get into any of the practical stuff, as far as doing the searches and creating our My Markets and running reports, etc., we need to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row for the actual reports and the information we're sending out. So up at the top right corner, once you guys get signed in and registered for RPR, there's going to be a little profile icon up here at the top right corner. And we've got profile. Now, there is a settings option we're going to be covering in just a minute here, as well as some data tools that you guys might need access to, especially if you guys are brokers. But today we're going to be focused on just the things that everybody is going to have access to. So I'm going to just do profile and settings. So starting off with our profile, this actually has all of the information that's going to be appearing, both, as you guys can see, I've got my photo here, as well as all of our reports that we're going to be creating. So when we finally find that property that we want to tell our client about, we may want to have some extra information on there as far as how to reach out to us, what might be necessary to be done. There's a whole bunch of extra things with the reports. We'll be covering that in a moment. But we need to make sure that this profile includes an up-to-date photo. So make sure that you guys are using the same photo that you use everywhere else. We also have the option to add in a logo. So for instance, if your office has not already added in their logo onto RPR, you guys can add that in there. It also has space for your first and last name. This is open-ended, so you guys don't have to feel like you have to go by whatever your legal name is. So for instance, my name is Michael. I just prefer going by Mike. So I have that put in there. Your office information may actually be locked down, but if you guys do notice that this is incorrect, they are getting that information from our membership team. So just make sure to reach out to us on the service desk or on the membership team, and we can get that up to date. Now we also have a space down here for phones and faxes. If you guys needed to add in any additional information. So for instance, if you guys still have a pager and somebody from 1999 is trying to page you, you guys can add that in there. Same thing goes for your fax number. Still amazed how many people fax. We've got the email, the website options. Now, the section that I actually really want to make sure you guys understand is this MLS or CIE info. Now, this is going to be defined by state and then by MLS. So for instance, if I wanted to add in, let's say I've got a membership with MLS OK, which is over in the Oklahoma City area. I can select my state, scroll down here to MLS OK, and all I'd need to do is provide my MLS ID or CIE ID in order to add that information into here. Now, in case this seems a little bit unnecessary, more likely than not, you may already have your MLS technology connection made. We tried to make sure that this was going to be as streamlined a process as it could be. But if you come in here and find that on your profile you don't have the connection to MLS technology or any of the other MLSs you're a part of, again, just put in your basic information. This is going to be looking for whatever you use to sign in to the MLS. So if you guys have a 5 or 6 digit number, or if you guys are one of the older groups that has your actual name as your username, you guys can put that information in and then hit add. Now, this is something that's actually tied to the data that's being provided by our MLS. So I'm going to explain down here at the bottom this listing data access. Once you guys get connected to our MLS, as far as RPR is concerned, you'll be provided access to the on-market and off-market information for all 38 counties that we actually cover. Same thing goes for MLS OK. They are providing basic on-market information, but they may actually not be sharing off-market information unless you actually are a part of their MLS. They do cover 21 counties though, so it might be valuable information. Up here at the top, when these MLSs are actually sharing their data, they do have a choice as to whether or not they're going to be feeding that information into RPR. Now, as you guys can see, we've got a few of the MLSs in the state, in this case, literally half in Oklahoma, are actually not sharing their on-market or off-market data with RPR. Now, if you do end up having, like, let's say you guys are part of that Grand Lake Association, the Northeast Oklahoma Board of Realtors, they may not be providing their information out for whatever the reasons are. But if you guys do end up having a membership with them, you may want to at least get the information that you can that they are providing. So make sure that you guys connect that. And again, that's back here on this page. You can put that in there. And hopefully they actually provide some extra information to their members, even if they aren't sharing that with the rest of the realtors. A little further down, we have our license number information. This is going to allow you guys that actually have multiple states that you're a part of to add in your extra information. As you guys can see, I don't have anything because I am not allowed to have a license. Now, the last section on here is our assistant users. This is actually an important area. So we've mentioned already that the realtors are actually meant to be the only ones that have access to the realtor property resource. The idea behind the assistant users is that if you do have somebody that maybe is like an office admin or an assistant to you, they can actually get that access so that if you needed them to run a report, you can just send them a text, say, can you run a report on such and such property, send it to such and such email address, and then they can just take care of that so that while you're talking to your client at some showing, or maybe they pointed at some property across the street, and they're like, hey, tell me more about that one. You don't even have to take your hands off the wheel. You guys can just get that information into their hands immediately. Now, we're going to be talking some more about the reports. The cool thing about the assistant users is that they still have access to all the same information that you guys have access to as the realtor. And subsequently, they can navigate through RPR just like normal. Now, because of that, it's important to recognize that this is not meant for the public to be able to do this. This is not meant for you guys to provide some seller or some investor access to RPR. There is a lot of information that is in RPR that's coming directly over from MLSs that is not meant for public consumption. Now, you guys may recognize that that's kind of similar to how we have our reports in Matrix set up. So for instance, if I select some things, Matrix actually delineates between the agent-specific reports that we can create and the client-specific reports. Because RPR is meant to be only for the agents, only for realtors, you are going to be seeing a lot of information that the clients probably shouldn't ever see. So prime example would be if you guys have some kind of contingencies, or if there's some broker remarks that might be giving security codes, or even just the compensation amounts sometimes are not meant to be viewed by the public. So make sure that you guys recognize that this assistant user section is only for legitimate assistance, not for just anybody that you guys want to give access to it. All right. Now, let's scroll back up to the top. One of the things I wanted to clarify, because we are connecting our information over to RPR and letting them know who we are, either by connecting to our MLS or CIE, I wanted to clarify that this is not actually an MLS where you guys can add in extra data. So what this means when we actually establish this connection is just that we're going to be providing our profile with this extra piece of information. We are not actually having our listings funnel through this connection. It's actually gathering the information for our listing data outside of this little connection that we're creating here. Now, you also don't have any listing syndication through RPR. It is the endpoint for a lot of those sources of information. So if you guys add a listing into Matrix, that listing is going to get syndicated out into RPR, and that's it. It doesn't go anywhere else. They're not selling our information. They're not taking your data that you guys have provided into here and pushing that out to advertisers or anything. This is an endpoint for all of that data. All right, so let's head now. I'm going to hit the save option here, and we're going to change our settings. Now, the settings is actually where we can find how we can manage what's going to appear on the map and how far back we want that information to go. Now, as you guys can see, this actually is broken down by residential and commercial. I'm going to keep this brief. I'm going to just set mine to the last 14 days, and recently closed sales leases, I'm going to set that to 30 days. Now, this is going to ensure that I don't have a lot of clutter on my map. This is kind of important for those of you guys who are really going to be invested into that My Markets section at the beginning, or if you guys have any saved searches that you wanted to construct, etc. Make sure that you guys adjust this to how you would like it to appear. And then same thing goes for commercial. You guys have a separate section just for commercial. You guys can adjust that. And I left this one at the maximum so you guys can see, even though I only set mine to 14 days for residential, 30 days for the closed, you can set this all the way up to 30 days for new listings and 180 days for closed sales. The My Market section, what I would suggest to you guys is that if you are going to be setting up the My Markets, make sure that you set this up with whatever your stomping grounds are. So try and consider where it is that you're working. You guys can set this up to all sorts of different levels of magnitude. Like I've got a bunch of these that are just cities. I tried to put in here all of the different locations that we actually go out to do outreach training. If I wanted to add in any more, you can actually just type in either a specific city, or if you guys notice, there's even an option for zip codes. So if I wanted to maybe get that one zip code downtown, Tulsa, and that'll actually provide me a much more narrow view than one of these other options might. Now, we do also have, if I remember correctly, a county option as well, which is going to be far larger. Again, just an order of magnitude larger than what you guys are going to be dealing with these specific city names. But if you guys want a whole county, so let's say we wanted all of Wagner County, just start typing it. Make sure to click on the drop down from below so that it selects the right one. And now I've got Wagner County, Oklahoma. Now, again, once you guys are done with any changes, make sure to hit save and you're good to go. Now, something that didn't change whenever we switched between profile and settings was this account info. So if you guys are going through, you need to make any changes to things. Maybe you guys are wanting to put in a new password, or maybe make sure which of the devices that you have access to the mobile app. All of that can be changed over here on the right. But as you guys can see, it just stays there in case you guys need it. All right, so we added in a new section on our My Markets. I'm going to head back to our homepage, and let's go ahead and select that Wagner County and give you guys a little bit of information on that. So because we actually made some changes to how far back we actually want our listings to show that they're new, and also how many of the sold properties are going to be appearing, you may notice that this is a little bit more cluttered than whenever I was looking at other things. And it's also actually providing me a much larger space because I've actually chosen the entire county instead. Now, a little bit later, we're going to be talking more about how to interact with the map. And there is actually a map search function. Let's go ahead and get started with the actual search functions. So I mentioned before that we were going to try and cater our examples that we're going to be using towards two different kinds of clients. We've got our buyers and our sellers. So we're going to start off first with doing a search for our buyers. Now, in my case, I'm actually going to be trying to find just the properties that are currently for sale. I have on my search function here, I've got it set towards residential. And I also have a little location space here that's actually providing me whether I want to search by an address, a certain location, or if I have a tax ID or listing ID already in hand, I can actually search by those as well. Now, there are some other basic elements over here to the right. And this is kind of like online shopping, effectively, if you guys have shopped at all online. There are drop downs that allow you guys to choose the different criteria that you guys would like to use. And then it also provides you an option to do all or specifically choose certain elements, which I believe is also present on, oh, that's under the filters, excuse me. We're going to be talking a little bit more about these later. I'm going to switch mine over to just simply a single family option. And then we're also going to set a price. Now, notice the price section. We have a price for just the sale, price for lease. This is contextual, so if I remove the lease option, you notice it grays this out, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. And there's some new options that they've added down here where we can do minimum, maximum. We just either can type in a number, which is actually really nice. I don't know if you guys have used, what is it, Realtor.com has a new professional search. It was it almost looked like it was supposed to be in direct competition with RPR, but it didn't leave a lot of room for nuance, I felt. One of the nuances that I wish that it had access to was being able to type out an actual number. In this case, if I have a client that maybe had a hardline budget of 250K, I can actually type that in there and it'll fill out the rest of the number for me. So it saves a lot of time so that you're not having to, kind of guess or set it based on just some larger numbers. But we also get the nuance of adding in what our living square footage is, what our lot square footage is, or lot per acre. So this is going to take the total price of the property that's for sale and do that square footage amount, the lot square footage or the lot acreage. So it makes it really easy to try and cater for if you guys do have a buyer that has like some grandiose ideas of like wanting to find a really good deal on their property, they can actually have a search that's constructed for that. And actually in a moment here, when we get to our advanced filters, I'm going to show you guys another option for searching for deals as well. Now the bedrooms and bathrooms, these are both broken down into minimum and maximum. I really like the way that this is set up because if you guys put in a number on the minimum side of things, it'll just automatically assume that you're looking for anything over that unless you put in another number. So for instance, if I do 2+ and then I do 3, it's now searching 2 to 3 bedrooms. Whereas if I just leave this with just 2, notice it leaves it with that plus. It makes it really easy to just dive in, grab a couple pieces of information, and then start searching. Now, if I'm going to run a search, I have the option to type in, again, addresses, locations of any kind. There is a search current location option. So if you guys do have a internet provider that's actually giving you guys the location data for whatever your physical location is, you can actually hit that button. I'm not going to do that for me though. But we also have the filters option over here. Filters actually expands out this section so that we can see the location, the same status options that we had before, as well as everything being expanded out now so that we can see our price, our size, all of this stuff. All the way down here, we've got currently distressed. I'm going to exclude all, or we can specifically search for pre-foreclosure, foreclosure, or foreclosed properties. Then we also have open house options. So if there's open houses that have been added into the MLS, those will appear here. What kind of lot it is. What fields we have as well, that we've got the owner occupied, or if it's somebody that doesn't live physically at the location, we can search by owner name. If you guys are searching for maybe properties that are off market, this is an easy way to do a tax record search for the owner, what year it was built, how long it had been owned. And then there's also this keyword search that allows us to search for some of the things that, as you guys can see here, this is kind of focused more on the status, the type, and some basic elements of each of the properties. The keyword search allows for a lot more nuance. So for instance, if you guys wanted to search for mature trees, or if you guys wanted to make sure that there was a 3-car garage, you can check some of those checkboxes, or you can type those in up at the top and it'll treat it as a keyword search for anywhere on that listing. So for instance, in this case, it'll search for if they mentioned mature trees, or if it was a cul-de-sac, you can click on cul-de-sac, that kind of stuff. Now, let's actually go ahead and create a real search. So I'm going to close up my filter here. Let's say that I just landed on the home page of RPR and I wanted to build my search out. So in the chat function, if you guys wouldn't mind, provide me with a location that we're going to be using for our example. I'd like to try and keep the examples live and practical. This way you guys get a taste of what's actually happening. Sometimes I feel like people are a little bit more hesitant to use a system if they maybe have only seen like some curated examples of how it's supposed to work at its best, but I like leaving open the chaos of the data that you guys might be running into over time. Oh, we've got somebody wanting Durant. We can start with that. If anybody else is typing in there, go ahead and finish typing what you're typing. We'll use the examples as class goes on anyway. So we're going to start off with Durant. And notice when I type in on my location, it provided me with a bunch of different places so that we can just kind of jump directly into a specific example. If there were any listing IDs that might match up, or tax IDs, we can see those down here at the bottom. But in my case, I'm just searching for Durant. So I'm going to click on that. Now you notice that whenever I clicked on my location, it just immediately started the search. Now there's a couple different ways for us to make some adjustments to that. Now, again, I typically like putting in all of my extra details first and then adding in my location. But either way, you guys want to construct this, whether you guys added in all those details, or in my case, now that I've already run my search for Durant, I wanted to come back and say that I only wanted to see the things that are active. I only wanted to see the things that are single family. I need to add in my price range for my client. Maybe they only want to do 200 to 300. Bedrooms, let's do 3 and 2. Here we go. Now I can run this search again, and you'll notice it went from 115 properties to 9 properties. And there is also the option to open this back up and add in any additional filters. So for instance, if I wanted to make sure that the living area was a certain amount of square feet, whether it's not in foreclosure of some kind, make sure that it has a 2-car garage. Now I can hit update search, and it'll narrow down my results even further so that I have only these 2 matches. Now you notice the default that we actually ended up with here after I've ran my search is I've ended up in a list view. Now the list view provides me with a primary photo if the photo is provided on that listing. I can click on those to jump right into it, but it also shows me some of the other details about the property. So for instance, I've got 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, what year it was built, what the price per square foot is, and what the lot size is. So there's a lot of nice basic information here. It also provides me the option to save something. So even without actually giving this property any further inspection, if I decide that this might be a property my client might be interested in, I've got that save option. Now we can also switch this over to a view that gives us a little bit more of a peek into the primary photo. Up at the top right corner, we've got our 3 different views. Now again, the default that we see here is this list view, similar to the way that Matrix works. But then I also have the option here for a photo grid view. Now the photo grid view, again, gives me a little bit of a larger view of that primary photo. Man, it must have been a really beautiful day that they took that shot. Then we also have this one. We've got the option to slide between each of the photos. As I hold my cursor over that, you can move between them. Oh, this one actually doesn't have multiple photos. Oh, it does. I just can't see the arrow. That's okay. You can move through those. And again, we've got the little save icon here. And then if I wanted to take a look at the property itself, I can just click onto the photo and that'll actually zoom me into the listing details. Now, we're going to jump back. We're going to talk more about this information a little bit here, but I wanted to show you guys a couple things. When we actually click onto any of our search results, you'll notice that there's effectively a navigational breadcrumb trail that's up here at the top. Now we have the option to move between the 2 different listings that we saw whenever we were looking at our results page. So for instance, if we do end up having a ton of different results, we can move between them by using this next and previous. But let's say I just want to jump directly back to my search results. This is the navigational breadcrumb trail here. I'm going to click back on search results. Hey, and I'm right back to where I was. And notice it did remember what view that I had just been viewing it on. And then we also have the final option here. This is actually going to just show us our map. So it tried to make it look like a little map icon. This gives me the option to view where they are located physically and see where they are in relation to Durant. So if I wanted to jump back, I can jump back to my list view. I can see the other property here, click on it. We can now take a look at the actual properties themselves. So once we've actually found the properties that we're interested in, we can go from our search results into the property, and we'll have a new set of navigation that we can do up here at the top. We've got our summary that starts off with the basic information about the property. It starts off with the photos so that we remember what this looks like. We've got a street view, which is going to be coming from the Google Street View. It doesn't appear that we have one. We do have an overhead view option, which allows us to see the satellite imagery of the property. And then there is also the historical photos. So if this property did have any previous listings, we can jump back to any of those previous listings and find out what the property might have looked like before. So, but I'm going to jump back to our photos. Another thing about the photos is that you guys can navigate through them. We've got a couple different buttons. The single arrow icon is going to move us forward 1. The double arrow moves us to the end of the property or the beginning of the property. And then there's also a full screen option, which gives us the choice to see the photos. And you'll notice that it actually started us off on a slideshow view. So we can actually present this to the client, turn the computer around, have them take a look at this. And as you guys can see, it keeps on giving us the option for saving it as a favorite. And it has that same option here as well. Now, we also have a section here for the map. Now, interestingly enough, this map is actually something that provides us a lot of data. Now, we're going to be conducting a map search a little bit later. It's going to be more curated towards the actual map functions. But just so you guys are aware, when you guys are looking at the map, there is an extra couple options over here on the right. We do have the option to do a full screen. We can change what the view is if we want it to go to satellite, aerial, road, or terrain. Terrain's probably not going to do much since it's Oklahoma. Oh, look at how flat it is. Go. We do have a draw tool. This would be handy if we're actually searching for something on the map. We also have some driving times. So for instance, if you do end up having somebody that's interested, like for instance, I hate commuting. This was actually a deciding factor in a couple of the jobs that I've had. I live in Tulsa, and driving out to Bartlesville to work at Phillips 66 was just way too much, which is why I ended up getting this job, was because it was only going to be about 15 minutes away from my house. So travel time might be incredibly important for your buyers as well. You guys set up the travel time. You guys can put in the address, and what that'll do is actually show you how far you can get in a certain amount of time. Same thing goes with distance and traffic counts. Traffic counts just adds in any of the traffic that you guys might need to know. So for instance, if you guys wanted to show your client that this is an area that's not going to have a lot of car noise, you guys can point out to them that this is all the traffic that they get. There's a bunch of traffic that comes in on the highways, but then once you guys get into the neighborhood, there's no traffic information at all because it's very slow there. But there might be a lot of noise from this highway if they are interested in not seeing that. Points of interest is also an important one. This actually provides you a bunch of different areas on here. So for instance, if we wanted to maybe find out where the nearest hospital was, I can zoom this out, set the points of interest, turn on all the community, all the business, hit apply, and it's going to flood my map with a whole bunch of different little dots. So giving me all the points of interest. And notice, because of the variety of this, you may not want to do this all on or all off. So I'm going to clear this out. We're just going to set our points of interest to, let's do healthcare and services. Perfect. Hit apply. There we go. Oh, wow. There's still a lot of, oh, and you know what? I'm fairly certain if I zoom in on any of these, there's a very real possibility that some of these are actually like doctors' offices, not just hospitals. And I think also dispensaries are now showing up as the healthcare services as well. But anyway, we'll clear that off. And we also have our school information as well. The schools can be added onto the map. You know what, I need to just set this to full screen so we can actually stop scrolling up and down. There we go. So when you guys add the schools, you do have the option to add in public, private, charter, or elementary, middle, and high school. So if we wanted to see the public schools, we only wanted to see where the middle school and high schools are, we can hit apply, and it'll show us that information. And of course, I need to zoom back out. Go see how far away it is from my property. There is also a recenter option, which is going to zoom us back into the property that we were specifically looking at. That way, when we zoom back in here, we can see, oh, yeah, doesn't look like there's any schools nearby. So I might have to hop on that noisy highway nearby. Now, in addition, we do have the data layers. Now, this is something that we cover extensively in Realist and a little bit in Matrix as well. But I wanted to point out that we do have the residential real estate indicators in this data layers, which allows us to see a lot of the kind of maybe overarching data that you might be interested in or that your client might be interested in, so that they can see, all right, what's the housing density for these areas? So we can see there's lots of properties in Durant proper. We get out of town a little bit and it starts to taper off so that we don't have too many residential properties. So you can see those kind of faint overlays, whereas there's a nice dark yellow area here in the middle. We also have year built. This is going to show us how recently specific properties were built. We've got the average list price, average sales price, concentration of distressed properties, estimated value per square foot, 12-month change in estimated value, as well as the estimated home values as they stand currently. So there's a huge variety of extra information that you guys can provide to your clients. And interestingly enough, some of the reports will actually provide you a separate page for each and every one of these. So if you have a client that's maybe a little bit more data driven, maybe they're really interested in the numbers, these pieces of information can be provided to them. Now, the one that everybody is most interested in is that flood zones. Now, the flood zone map that they provide here is the one that's coming over directly from, directly from FEMA. Now, I wanted to point out that when we're actually looking at this, down here at the bottom, we've got our legend that shows what's actually being added onto our map. But an important distinction between how we actually see this in Matrix and Realist is that when we're looking at this map in RPR, it doesn't provide us the specific flood zone type. So the only thing that this is actually showing us is just the low risk to high risk, and that's it. So it's not providing us any specific details about, well, this one is specifically a, once in every 500 years, it's a floodway, or once every 100 years, it's a flood plain. That kind of information is not being shown. So it does give you at least a little bit of extra information down here at the bottom. But as you guys can see, again, this information is not specific to the, not as specific, at least on the legend, as it might be when you guys are looking at this in Matrix or Realist. But it does provide you a link down here at the bottom that allows you guys to learn more about this. If you guys would like to view more information, as always, there are a bunch of different ways for RPR to provide that information to you. So let's close out of the map for now. Again, all of this information that we just explored was on every version of the map. But if you guys are looking at a specific property, you guys can click on that interactive map and you guys can view extra information about the property, the area, etc. So whenever your client does end up having those questions that are maybe a little bit unusual for where you guys are looking at right now, you're like, oh, I just found this property that you might be interested in. What's the flood zone? Oh, okay, we'll jump right into the map, find out. A little further down, we see our listing agent information over here on the right. It shows us that Van Meter Realty is the one that's responsible. Barbara Coker is the one that has the listing in place. We've got our agent remarks. If you guys remember in the listing data that we have in Matrix, there is the broker remarks. This is where that information is going to show up. And then we also have the basic details about the property, including the list price, the basic facts about the property, and then there is an AVM on this particular property that's being provided based on a huge variety of different information. Now, I might as well ask, because I'm always interested to know this, how many of you guys are already familiar with the AVM, or have at least had some interaction with an AVM in the past? And maybe just to give you guys some extra clarification on this, an AVM is actually the automated valuation model. So what this is providing to us right here, we've got this AVM number here and more on the AVM right down here. The AVM is actually something that the computer put together to kind of guess what the value might be for this particular property based on a huge variety of different options. Now, one of the things that it's going to be focused in on is any tax record information that's come through. So for instance, if any properties in the area are actually selling right now, you can see that those properties are going to have a certain value, and subsequently the system will decide, all right, I'm seeing other properties that have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, roughly 2,000 square feet. I'm going to give it this value based on the information that's been provided to me about that area. So it contextualizes where this property is physically located, finds properties that are in the vicinity that are comparable, and then produces this number automatically. Now, it does provide you a confidence level for this. So you notice that this range that it provided is vast. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever worked with a client before that has an extremely specific vision of what their property's value should be. But usually if you give them a number and you provide them a range, your range is probably going to be relatively narrow. Like you're probably not trying to give them this huge amount of space for them to wiggle between. Now, the reason why it's giving us this estimated range is because it doesn't have a lot of confidence in the data that it's provided in order to produce this number. Now, this confidence score that it shows over here to the right is actually indicating it's a 1 star. Now, these stars do actually mean different things, but the basic idea is the same way that you guys are used to with, Siskel and Ebert back in the day, giving them their thumbs up or the 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever for restaurants. Same thing goes here. This confidence score is meant to indicate to you guys how likely it is that this number is accurate. So for instance, 5 stars would be the highest rating. If you guys would like to learn more about confidence scores, it effectively boils down to if you get something that actually has a 5-star confidence score, the anticipation is that it's going to be within a specific range 90% of the time. So it leaves a little bit of wiggle room for it so that if, the property is a little bit unique or if it's in an area that's a little bit harder to predict the value, but it has all of the information you could ever hope to find in that area, it'll give it a 5-star confidence score. If it doesn't have a lot of information, or maybe the market's kind of dead in that area, that confidence score will start to dip. So in addition to the AVM, you may end up coming across a property that has an RVM. Oh, wow, what incredibly good luck. One of the properties had an AVM, and I've switched over to the other property. This one's a little bit further in town, and subsequently we see that it has an RVM, and it actually has a relatively high RVM confidence. Now, the AVM and RVM are two terms for effectively the same basic idea, but the RVM is actually something that's been developed by the National Association of Realtors. Now, the RVM represents the Realtor valuation model, and what this is actually providing us is a significant improvement upon what a normal AVM would be providing. When an AVM is looking at the data that's been available to it in public records and some other places, it's really just going to be scratching the surface of what's available. Because of the fact that RPR is provided with so much data from so many different sources, again, over 350 different sources, this RVM is actually going to be significantly more accurate. So if you guys come across a property that has an RVM, the expectation is that there's a lot more properties that are moving in that area. There's a lot more data available. And subsequently, the value that it's going to be providing for this property is going to be a lot better. So in this case, we can actually see that the list price for this property is $285,000. The RVM is actually about 40,000, or excuse me, 60,000 less than that. But even on our RVM estimated range, it's giving us a pretty high confidence score. Because of that prevalence of data that's available, it's actually got a much more narrow range than what we saw before. So the previous property that we only had the AVM, and it was at the very bottom of the barrel when it came to what the confidence was. It's a lot closer to the list price that the agent provided, but this range is vast, 180 to 315. Whereas because we have a lot more information, it's a property that's in the center of Durant, we have a lot more data, so it has a higher confidence score. And because it has more information, the range is a lot more narrow. Now, it's just kind of a bad coincidence in this case that this happens to be a property that's been probably either dramatically improved, or there's been some other changes to it, or there's something that the numbers in the system are not going to be able to provide, because it's showing us that there's a much higher list price according to Jeremy than what the AVM or RVM might provide. Now, if you guys don't end up liking the number that you're working with, we do have a refine value and create CMA option, but I'm going to save those until we're discussing the seller side of things. That's when we're going to need to actually start focusing in on how to refine the value. Whereas in this case, if I'm working with a buyer still, my buyer is really just going to be looking at this list price, and I can maybe recommend that they try to argue down the agent, but this might be for a very specific reason. They may have some very specific justification for it. Now, a little further down on our reports here, we have the description. This is just going to be the basic public remarks that you guys are used to. We have the property facts, which has been broken down both into the public facts and listing facts. So we can see the difference between what the tax record shows and what the listing information shows. Now, interestingly enough, there's actually been a decrease in the number of bedrooms and partial bathrooms. It's an interesting choice to remove spaces, but that's okay. We've got our living area. This one's a nice large space. Got a garage. It shows that it's attached. So there's a bunch of extra details in here. There's also another section that's over here to the right. It's going to be available whether there's public and listing facts or just public facts, called Your Changes. Now, this is especially important when we work with the seller, so I'm going to leave this for later. We also show what schools have been added. Now, this is going to be broken down on a location basis and on the listing basis. So if you guys do end up having a property that you're working with, make sure that you guys are clarifying for the client. This is what the agent provided us as what schools the client's children will be going to. Whereas this one over here is actually just showing what properties or what schools are nearby. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is where the kids will be going. Typically, I try to trust the agent to put in the correct information, but there may end up being some gaps from time to time. So price change history. This is just showing us some basic information about what's happened with the price. Looks like it hasn't had any changes whatsoever other than coming back to active again. We have an AARP livability index, which was recently added. One of the things that I like about this, and this is the first time we're going to be taking a look at this, is that anytime we're actually looking at a specific piece of information, there's always going to be an option that says about this data, which means that if that source isn't coming from the listing or public records, we can learn more about where this particular piece of information comes from by going back to its source data. In this case, AARP recently added in a livability index, and they've actually provided this for the entire country. And we can see that this is actually only updated annually. So if there's any dramatic changes to the livability index, you guys can notice those, but it's only going to be done on a yearly basis. A little bit further down, we see some interior, exterior features, so on and so forth. Again, just basic information about the property towards the bottom. This stuff's all kind of boring, so we're going to go ahead and skip back up here to the top. I'm going to quickly cover our history and charts, and then we're going to go ahead and take our break. So on the history section, this is where we can find out more details about the property itself. You can actually have a 1, 2, 3, or I believe this actually ends up being somewhere around like 5 or 6 years total. But we can see all of the sales and financing activity for this property. Now, depending on the property that you're working with, you may end up finding that this actually has a vast amount of extra information on here about previous listings, extra details about the assessment of the property, if there's been any assessors that have added in details. Hey, actually, this one has some extra information. Here we see some listing activity and then a sale. We can also hit this about this data, and it shows us where all of this information is coming from and how recently it's been updated. Prior sales is going to be broken down into public records and listing records. Tax information is going to be available. You guys can move back year by year. The mortgage record information. Notice there's also a little scroll button here. This is going to show us all the different mortgage records as time goes on. But we also have the charts. Charts is a really especially good tool for anytime you've got an investor. If we wanted to check out the value of this particular property in tandem with the zip code, the county, and also the state, we can see all of that information all at once. And we can also turn off certain elements so that if we don't want to see Oklahoma's information, we just want to see more contextual information about this area, we can see these charts and what they provide to us. Now, over here on the right-hand side, you may have noticed that this has actually kind of followed us from a couple different areas there. These charts are also going to be showing us this particular area, as well as giving us some context on not only Durant, Bryan County, but also Oklahoma. Now, we'll talk more about the refined value and the CMA after we come back from our break, and then we'll discuss the neighborhood option a little bit later as well. So I'm going to hop back to my homepage and bring our video back up onto the screen. I will see you guys back at 10:15. So again, we're going to take our 10-minute break. If you guys hear the music stop and the video is no longer on the screen, that means we're going to be starting back up again. So I will see you guys back here. And we're going to be using Claremore as our next search. All right. So let's get back to it. So we left off after talking a little bit about how to handle some of the buyer interactions, but we didn't end up getting an opportunity to review some of the reports that you can create with that. So before we get started with dealing with some of our seller information, we're going to just take a last quick tour of what we're going to be needing for our buyers. Now, I do want to point out, I'm going to hop back to our home page here. We're going to be doing our search for sales. I've got it set to only single family. You know what, let's just keep these settings and we'll just run our search now for Claremore. Hopefully we'll have the same luck with finding some good examples. There we go. So we've got some properties here. It looks like they're all falling within our specific price range that we were hoping for. Let's actually talk now about how we can actually take this data that we have currently and either create mailing labels, printing it, or creating some reports. There's some checkboxes over here to the left, the same that we see in Matrix. And if you check on any of these, you can actually start grabbing some of those for printing or creating reports. I'm going to actually hit this create report option. What I'm actually going to be doing is taking the specific area. So notice we've actually run a search. I want to actually find out more information about this neighborhood, and it's providing me by default a market activity search. This is going to narrow our search down to just Claremore, Oklahoma, or we can actually specifically dive into a neighborhood search, which is going to, again, grab the same data that we have for specifically Claremore and create housing stats and charts, people stats and charts, economic stats and charts, quality of life, including the AARP livability index, and then some information about RPR. Now, as you guys notice, whenever I clicked on this to change which report, it actually opened up a section here that shows me all of the different pages that are available. So now that I'm choosing back to our market activity, it expanded this area out, and I can contract this, expand it. This is also going to be available for any of our properties that we're actually interested in. Now, in this case, we may need to start clarifying which properties we're actually interested in working with. So I'm going to jump back to our search results. I think I may have misled you guys just a little bit. We checked the checkboxes, and then I didn't end up actually using something for that. But let's say that I wanted to just do a print. We could do only the selected properties. And what this will provide us with is just a quick overview of the data, the same way that we see on here. And then mailing labels, same thing goes with this. It actually provides us some basic details about how to do this. And you'll notice that records in this export is actually, even though I have a couple checked here, it's going to be sending off 17 properties down into just 14 because there's only 14 properties to actually print off. Now you can choose which way that you guys would like to narrow this down. So like if you wanted to do a CSV file so that you can just interact with Excel, create your mail merge, whatever the case may be, or you can create a PDF based on any of the Avery options. And for those of you guys who have done any exports or printing in Realist, this is going to function the exact same way. We've got a property or tax billing address. We can do the owner and or current resident, or even just put in a custom name. Then we also have whether it's owner occupied or absentee owner, exclude listed properties, exclude properties on do not mail list, which might explain the discrepancy between the 17 and the 14, and exclude properties with an incomplete address, which I might as well point this out just because we've been noticing this a lot recently. Some people have been adding listings into our system that don't have the street type for whatever reason. Try to make sure that your addresses are as complete as they can be. My usual recommendation is just grab whatever the information is from the tax record. We've noticed a lot of instances recently, especially for whatever reason in Southern Oklahoma, it seems like some of the tax records might be a little bit misconnected, but usually if I'm going in and I see a property that has, 5693 480, well, it doesn't show the east, it doesn't show the road, it's just 5693 480. And that's how it appears in our listing data. And then subsequently, when RPR picks it up or Zillow picks it up, then it doesn't know where it's located physically. You're not advertising the property correctly. So it could cause a cascading effect on all of the other places that receive our data. But that's neither here nor there. That's more of just a recommendation for the MLS side of things. But let's now talk a little bit about the reports that we can create for properties that are for sale. So I'm going to jump into just this property here. I see that I've got an RVM on this. Looks like it's got a 5-star confidence level. Notice an extremely narrow range that this is provided to us, as well as a number that's a little bit off from what the list price is, but maybe the market is actually starting to spike up. So this value is actually not going to necessarily reflect those dramatic fluctuations in market value. But I'm happy with this particular property. I've gone through and checked out my history, showing all of the details about, what's changed with this property over time, the charts showing some basic information about the property's relative status as far as the price goes, the size, etc. But I actually want to get that information in the hands of my client, along with some other basic information about this property, including, what the size is, what the description is, all the basic facts about the property. That's actually where we're going to get into the create report option. Now, the create report option in this case is going to default us to property report. So because of the fact that I was looking at a specific property, I've got property report. I can expand this section out. So just like we saw when we were actually switching between between the different reports, excuse me, it would automatically expand out what was going to appear. I can manually do that with that plus or minus. There's a bunch of checkboxes that are checked already. Now, at the moment, I actually have mine set to just show all of these by default. But if I go through and decide that I don't want to have to include some information about RPR, or if I don't want to include the school reviews, or maybe I didn't need to give too much extra information about the neighborhood for my client, I can check or uncheck all of those. And whenever I run this report, it actually saves what these defaults were so that the next time I try to run a report, it's only going to include the information that I think is relevant. So you may want to double check this, especially if you guys are working with different clients with different needs. You may find that I'm going to jump into my property report. I just want to get some information out to them. I'm going to uncheck a bunch of checkboxes. But then the next client that you're working with is one of those, again, data hungry, wants to know everything about everything kind of people. You may need to jump back in and check the checkboxes again for them rather than just hitting that run report button and hoping everything is fine. So in my case, I'm going to hit reset all. That gets all my fields back to normal. I can see all of the different variants of the information that we're going to be sending off to the client. Starting up from the top, we've got our subject property summary. We've got the property values, which includes the listing price, my estimated value, and then also any comp analysis results that we've created. Now, I haven't created any of this, but I might want to not include the lower value that was coming up because of the RVM. And I might want to just uncheck that checkbox if I came to a similar conclusion. So we can only see the listing price in there. A little further down, we do have the option to also suppress specific information. So for instance, the estimated value for the property, maybe I just don't want to show that at all. Estimated value for comps, we'll leave that out as well. And suppress the refined value for our property as well, just to make sure that if I had made any changes, which we'll be covering here in a minute, I won't see that either. Now, a little further down, we also have a seller's report. We're going to be discussing that later. But as you guys saw up here at the top, when we're actually looking at this property report, I'm going to contract the options that are available. The default that is present is going to be roughly around 28 pages. Now, I've seen the property report be over 30. I've seen it be all the way down to like barely 20. But if you guys do end up having some need to make some adjustments to the length, that's what those checkboxes are all for. Now, I also wanted to point out that if you don't want to run one of these larger reports, you do have the option to choose one of these that are a little bit shorter. So for instance, we have one that's just a 1-page property flyer. If I check the checkbox for that, you notice this actually shows me a preview over here on the right-hand side. I choose which of the photos I actually want to include. I really love this color scheme. I'm going to choose, let's do that one. Nice showcase of the panels. We can see the nice backyard in the background. I think that'll be sufficient. Excellent. I'm going to scroll down a little further, And notice now I actually have the option for a headline. Beautiful home. Oh, I didn't spell that right at all. There we go. Perfect. And it actually tosses in the description in here directly from the public remarks. So we do have one last chance to make sure that if there was something in here, we can actually just remove any editorializing or add in our own editorial. We also have some details on the side here that we can suppress as well. But it's all going to be jammed onto just the one page. And this is kind of a preview that it's going to show you where it shows a map on the left, photo on the right, some details, the description, and then information for me specifically. So when I run my report, I've got that run report button that you guys can see is just traveling with me the whole way down. I'm actually going to check the checkbox here for display now. And when I run this report, what it's going to do is it's going to add a little number up to the top, showing me how many reports I have that are currently being produced. And then whenever this is ready, it's going to play a little doorbell sound that's actually going to let me know that the report is complete. And again, I did not have to manually add in any extra information. I checked the checkbox, I added in some text, and this report's going to be coming out. The property flyer, in my opinion, is by far the most difficult report to produce. What you guys just saw me do is the most difficult task that you guys might have for the property flyer. It's very easy. The rest of these reports, like the mini property report, for instance, notice it's a much simpler version of the larger property report that we see up here. And this one's going to show us just some basic information about the property. This is going to be a little bit less focused on what the neighborhood looks like, what the details are about, demographic information, that kind of stuff. So if I wanted to run this one as well, oh, hey, got one of my reports done. I'm going to just scroll down here to the bottom. We'll do display now, run report. So now I have a second one that's going to be created. This one's going to be the mini property report. And then let's actually run a regular property report, and we'll take a look at that one as well. So again, I'm leaving all of these checkboxes checked so we can see what this looks like. So you guys can kind of see the variety of different ways that these can show. Now, as we saw, I've got a specific report that's already been created. So I'm going to come up here to the top, and I can see I've got one property report, one property flyer, and one mini property report that's been produced. I've got the on and off for that report bell. So if I didn't want that to obnoxiously ring in my ear next time it produces a report, I can turn that off. But I can also jump back into my property flyer. I accidentally clicked the wrong button. The thing pops up on the screen and I'm like, ooh, click it. There we go. All right, let's see our property flyer. I'm gonna do download. Let's take a look at this. So here's the beautiful home with gardens. It shows my map. It shows the photo that I chose. And then it shows the basic details, the description, and presented by. I noticed it's got my information here. Now this is being presented by, not listed by. Listing is courtesy of, and this is that legal requirement that every listing has to have, that whenever you present it to the internet, it has to show where it came from. Now we also had that mini property report. This one just used the default photo, but it has a lot of information on here. Because I did not choose to suppress the estimated value, it is showing me the estimated value in addition to what the list price was. We've got some basic details about the home, the extended home facts, a mini property report section here for just the AARP livability index. Notice it has a link here for the data source and how recently it's been updated. So when it goes out to the client, it's trying to provide them all those extra details. Here's all the photos for the property history. Again, this one's going to be a little bit more simplistic. It's just trying to provide them basic information just so that they can kind of dive in a little bit. Now, my final report just finished off, the property report. But let's take a look at the 3 different variants. When we clicked on the property flyer, single page, barely any information, but just enough to get their appetite whet. Then we also have on here the 13-page report. So remember, it told us that it was going to be approximately 12. It ended up with 13. Our property report, on the other hand, ended up being 29 pages. And again, this is just all the defaults. So I didn't end up suppressing anything, removing anything. I just reset it all back to the default options. So it includes so far a lot of the basic information that we saw before. But underneath the photos, now we see a historical photo section showing us what the house looked like on a previous listing. Any comps and adjustments showing any of the comps that are available in the area. Doesn't look like there's any comps that it could find. Slide on down here. We've got some basic information about the neighborhood, some more data about what the charts are. In fact, these are all coming from that charts section that we saw earlier. Some demographic information, so neighborhood data. So if the client's maybe a little bit more interested in finding out about the schools and what kind of population it is in the area and so on. Oh, and actually, you know what? I should mention this since we're scrolling past it. Community reviews for schools can be turned off. I just wanted to point out that sometimes people can be very candid in their reviews of the schools. And as such, you may end up noticing that there might be some not so great reviews of specific schools. So just bear that in mind. Especially, I mean, look at the difference between, we got what this was the 8th grade center, nice and short. And then the next one is the high schools. Look at this, there's a whole bunch of them. Actually, all of them are seniors except for this one, the alum. So yeah, those are not curated. It's just coming from over there. It's a company called Niche that does those. And by the way, the grade scores that they have for these are academic achievement. So it's just showing you guys what you're working with as far as the how well accomplished the schools are effectively. So, but take a look at a little bit more of the reports section when we start working with our seller, which I need to begin right now. So let's actually head back to our homepage. Let's talk now about working with a specific seller. So there's a couple different ways for us to start off this process. So far, what we've been focused on is actually trying to find properties that are currently listed. I'm going to actually switch over up here at the top from my for sale and switch over to public records. Now you'll notice that public records actually switches us to just any data for any listing or any property, excuse me, any property in the system. Now, again, since the system is nationwide for pretty much every single property that you can find in the country, it does give us a vast amount of extra information. Now, they do give us a chance to actually have the sold within. If you guys would like to set up a calendar of where you're searching between, so if you had a targeted search that you were looking for a property that sold, whether it was FSBO or through an MLS, you can find that. But I'm just going to leave mine with just the public records and no date range. Property type, I'm going to just set this back to all. We'll clear out our price stuff. There we go. All right, back to default. Now, I'm going to put in an address in here. I've got a couple different ways that we can handle this. I have an address that we can use as an example, or if you guys would like to, if you have an example property that you would like for me to run my search with, I can actually do a live tutorial with a property that you guys are interested in if you guys type in that address on the chat. So just to start me off, I'm going to go ahead and use my example, but if you guys have an address in mind, go ahead and post that in chat. We can switch over. Actually, let me reset this real quick. I thought that I had already done so. There we go. All right. So I've got a property here. This is 5125 South Sandusky Avenue in Tulsa. When I ran my search for this particular property, it's important to recognize that I didn't actually clarify that I wanted it to be for sale, for lease, closed recently, or anything. Oh, perfect. Actually, Joanna Baker provided me an address. We're going to go ahead and use that one. And actually, I'm going to show you guys a little handy trick to this. I am already currently looking at a property. I can jump back to a property search or head back to my home page with the uh, breadcrumb trail here, or I can click up here at the top and jump directly into a property search, map search, neighborhood search, and so on. Now I'm going to click on the property search option and type in the address. Now it's going to automatically give me the choice for the property as long as I've given it information that should work. Let me put the east after, maybe. I'm used to it just popping up with the addresses. So let's see if it actually finds it. Oh, yeah, just dove right into it. It didn't even need me to autofill. That's even better. Is this one off the market? It is. Excellent. All right. So we've got a property here. Again, I just went up to my property search, or you guys can do that from the home page. Either way will bring you to the same place. But what this actually does is it brings you directly into the property's information. And we can save this if we want to keep working with this property. Since I've got a seller on the line, I can click on the map to learn more about the property itself. But let's scroll down here now to where we've got our RVM. And then we also have a section here for our changes. Oh, and actually, I like this example because since this is in Tulsa, it's going to be in Tulsa County, where we, for whatever dumb reason, Tulsa County has decided not to include the bedroom count. No worries. I can actually add that information in here. It's a 4-bedroom property. Thank you, Joanna. I appreciate that. And let's say that there were any other changes to the property, like if we needed to, if they added in a partial bath, we can change the numbers here. And you'll notice that whenever we end up starting to move towards any of these other screens, it'll remember the changes that I've made in addition to any of the stuff that I had not changed. So if we do end up needing to make any changes, it'll highlight those for us. But what this is actually going to allow me to do is keep track of any of the changes that the client has made to their property over time, so that even if it wasn't just a matter of there being blank, maybe they did actually make a modification to their property, made it a little bit larger, we can get all of that information added in there so that by the time I'm actually sitting in front of my computer putting in the listing data, this particular property will actually have all of the information that I might need on it. Now, in addition to being able to just add in a bunch of these other details, oh, hey, this house is as old as I am. In addition to adding in any of these other details about the property, there is going to be a section here for notes. So you can actually add in those notes. And what this will do is actually add in some details about, let's say that there's a greenhouse in the backyard. There we go. So I can save that. And all of this information can either be included on my reports so that the client knows that I've been trying to keep meticulous track of all of the details about the property. Oh, in-ground pool. Yeah, we put an in-ground pool. There we go. Actually, I think, is there another row for that? Oh, there isn't. There is an edit custom fax though. We can do. Oh, that's right. We haven't actually added any of those. I'm going to mess with those later. But I'm going to leave this empty for now. We'll just do pool in ground. Perfect. There we go. So there is an option at least to add in some extra details if you guys would need to. But I've got all of that saved. There is also a section over here to the right that allows us to add notes that are specifically for the property rather than specifically for the property's facts about them. So this might be details about the seller that you guys are working with, or details about how they would like the transaction to occur. There is also a section here for photos. Interestingly enough, when you guys are using the mobile app, you can actually save the photos with the camera on your phone directly to this property. So for instance, if you guys wanted to just run out to the property, get all the details about the property, take a photo of the property, you can jump back into Matrix and start adding in all of the details about this right away. So without having to do any extra legwork, ordering your photos because you've already been there at the property, etc. So it makes it really easy. Now, in addition to actually working with the seller about all of the details about their property, it may come down to us trying to have that final discussion about what the pricing will be. And RPR is able to provide you guys some extra ammunition for that discussion as well. Now, in this case, we've already got an RVM that actually has the highest score for the confidence level. You notice that it actually has a really, really narrow range for this particular property, $31,000 difference between the top and the bottom. That's pretty dramatic after that one that we saw at the beginning that was, oof, well over 100,000 range. But we need to try and narrow this down a little bit. So I'm actually going to head over to our refined value. Now, the comp analysis is going to work pretty much the same way that you guys would normally see the CMAs work in Matrix and Realist. So I'm going to save that one for a little bit later. Let's actually talk about how we can take this particular number. So again, the number that the system has produced with, in this case, high confidence. And I'm actually going to refine this value just a little bit further. Now you notice that whenever I got into this particular field, I've got the single family residence defined. I've got my bedroom count defined. I've got my number of full baths, partial baths, lot size, living area. But if I had gone back to just the default information, if I hit reset on this, clears out my bedrooms, clears out the improvement that I made to the living area, you can see that it doesn't have any change to the value. But because of the fact that I actually had the number of bedrooms, an extra partial bathroom added, and I even changed the living square footage, all of these details actually added in value to the property based on how much value each bedroom is worth in this particular zip code or this particular city, how much an extra partial bathroom would be worth, again, in this particular area. And then for each square footage, there's a dollar value added as well. Again, entirely based on the market for the area that this particular property is located in. So all of these details can be combined and subsequently give us an improvement on the value of this property. So it's really nice to be able to actually jump in and have the computer kind of give you some extra information, because if we start taking out some of this, you may notice that it actually decreases or increases the value pretty dramatically. So like even just having in the 4 bedrooms doesn't really do anything because it wasn't working with that data before, but adding in that partial bathroom is apparently worth $53,000, pretty much $54,000 extra for this particular area. Same thing goes with if I end up adding in that extra roughly 300 square feet. It adds in, goodness, just shy of 40,000. So again, this is all something to take with a grain of salt. This is why I'm kind of introducing you guys to it before we give the option for the CMAs. If you guys find that maybe some of this information, it doesn't feel right or doesn't seem like it's accurate to the area, you guys can choose whether or not to include this. So you don't have to be obliged to only work within the confines of what the algorithm is going to produce here. But if you guys do decide that you like this, you want to actually kind of build upon the number that the number that the algorithm produced, and then add on the value based on all of the area. You've got refined value where you guys can add in any major changes that they've done to the property. Let's say they spent another $2,400 there, even though they spent $2,400 back in, or $24,000 back in 2019. It only gave us an extra $15,000, $16,000 extra because this value depreciated over time. Refined value is going to be a little bit more of just a flat value. So again, if you guys are working along and trying to get all these details put in, oh, you guys did a family room addition. Actually, since we said that they did a bathroom addition, here we go, mid-range. We did that back in May of 2015. And forgive my naivete, I'm not sure how much a bathroom addition might cost, but we're going to add that in there. And you notice how little it actually added because it's trying to recognize that, all right, it's already got another value up here that's actually showing what the true value of that partial bath is as far as the market is concerned. Now the refined value section, this one's just going to be for improvements. fence repairs needed or something like that. I'm going to say that this requires $5,000. Notice this is actually a flat value. So instead of doing any kind of depreciation or any kind of algorithm where it's going to try and figure out like how much this extra value is worth or how much this extra bathroom is worth, or this is how much that particular improvement on the house might have depreciated over time. Any of the refined values by needed improvements are just a flat stock number. You type in how much it's going to cost, it's going to add that into the property's value, or in this case, subtract it. Now, the refined value section is where we can finally get a little bit more subjective information. I'm going to keep this brief just so you guys get kind of the gist of it. But at the moment, my property has gone all the way up to $310,000, which is a pretty huge boost to the price. Let's say that the particular area is actually kind of booming. I can slide this up and notice it added in an extra $4,700. We can say that the market conditions are, maybe a little bit hotter than that. Maybe I want to say that this actually should go up to like $10,000. I can just crank this all the way to the side. Ooh, that might be a little too much. I'm going to take it down a notch. Yeah, that works. Perfect. And I can leave it there. So this is a way to kind of like patch up some of the value that maybe some of these other things have done, maybe outside of your professional opinion on. But this also gives us the option to slide down as well. So for instance, if we did need to kind of temper the expectations here, because maybe they're right next to a Dollar Tree, say that the privacy is really low, and because the view is actually, the back of the Dollar Tree, we can crank that down, or whatever the case may be. So there are a lot of options on how you guys can adjust this, or you guys can leave it completely stock and actually choose not to include this section at all when you guys produce your report. So I'm going to leave mine where it is for now. Let's say that this is the value that I wanted to work with. Now I actually need to validate that by moving over into the CMA section. So I'm going to head back to my summary. What we did when we first got in here is I took a look at this RVM and decided that I needed to modify it. And there was a refined value option here that allowed me to jump directly into refining the value. We also have the option to jump up here to the refined value to do so, meaning I don't have to actually be on that summary page or even on that particular section of the summary to be able to jump into the refined value. Same thing goes for the CMA. Now, this is a pretty bold proposition that I'm going to be giving to my seller, since that's a pretty dramatic increase over the value that they saw before. I'm actually going to come and create a CMA just to make sure that I haven't accidentally overvalued the property. Now, there's two different ways for us to produce a CMA. Those of you guys who have any appraisal experience or any experience with some of the higher end, like BPO, stuff like that, you do have the option to create a sales comparison analysis. This is going to be a significantly more detailed evaluation of the property. There's a lot more refinement that you guys can do. You can put in specific values for things based on your own knowledge and understanding of the market. But typically people are wanting to stick with the comparative analysis. Now, if you guys need to find out the difference between them, as with so many other places in RPR, there is a simple button here that just does a what's the difference? And it's just a little video that you guys can watch to kind of learn more about what the differences are. But we're going to just start off with the stock comparative analysis. I'm going to confirm my home facts one more time. Again, notice it's going to be running with this 2 full bath, even though I have added in a partial bath and changed the total bath. It does show that I've also changed the bedrooms. Again, Tulsa County doesn't keep track of that information, so I added that in. And we've also got our livable area in there as well. So I think I've got everything that I need. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that. Let's actually now start the next step. So notice we started first step. We got everything updated with our home facts. Everything was correct. Now we're going to search for our comps. Now, when we're searching for comps, again, this is going to work the same way that it does in Realist, where we have very few options for us to change, but it's always going to be the major things that you guys want to keep track of. So in this case, single family residence, obviously, we need to make sure that we have all of the active listings, the pending listings, closed listings, and we can also include the expired listings if maybe that's Obviously, this isn't going to do much good for us right now since it's, I mean, I don't know any listings that have expired recently. It's very rare unless they're just dramatically overpriced um, or underpriced. But we've also got a time range. I usually recommend people to do 6 months or less, but never over 12 months. It does give you the option to do the last year and a half, but I can't think of a better example for not going back over 12 months than going back into the middle of 2020. I mean, last year was just an absolute mess. So we probably don't want to do that. We'll just do the last 6 months. That'll keep our range a little bit more narrow. I'm also going to make sure that we've got a very specific bedroom range, very specific bathroom range, and we've also got our living square footage. Notice these numbers are all automatically defined by the home facts that we clarified earlier. Now there is the option to include the price range, but I will point out, unless you guys have some really dramatic discrepancies, which if any of you guys actually are working in the Durant or any lake area, you may end up wanting to include this price range just because you may end up finding properties that are not close to the lake and subsequently won't be relevant to your search. But you do have the option to add that in there, but I will point out this will dramatically narrow your results if you guys do end up having properties that are in this same neighborhood that are dramatically lower or higher value. If you check this checkbox for the price range, you won't see those, which could throw off the accuracy of what you guys are working with. Your built might be important to include since this was built in 90s or 1986, I think it was. We're just going to leave that range there. Excellent. So I'm going to hit search. And what this has done, and it's important to recognize this as well, what this has done is it's actually taken all of those criteria, all of the filtering options, and the search that it ran is literally focused on just where my window was located here. So where this particular map was moved. So if I zoom out, you guys aren't going to see any examples outside of that box that was present right here. So as I zoom in, you can see that we've only got a couple up at the top there, one down here at the bottom, but it effectively tries to make sure that you're within a half-mile radius. Now you do have the option to draw a shape. You can use a custom area if you wanted, or you can even use a specific geography, like just within this zip code or within this macro neighborhood, micro neighborhood, whatever. Just fair warning, Oklahoma, for whatever reason, does not have neighborhoods codified. So those won't be useful for us, unfortunately, within the school district, within the grade school range, etc. You can narrow down those a little further, but so far, in my experience, I haven't actually come across any examples of properties not actually being relevant when it's using just the map search right here. But you do have the option to narrow that down further if you guys wanted to maybe draw a specific shape and use that for your search. But down here, we actually have finally gotten our search results. Now it breaks it down by the different property statuses. So in this case, we see all of our stuff that's for sale and all of the stuff that's been sold recently. And you'll also notice on here that it shows you which of these have been used for the RVM. So remember, the RVM was actually the estimated value that it provided earlier. Now, if I like this particular listing, looks like it's relatively close to the one that I'm going to be selling. I'm going to check that checkbox, add to comp list. So right here, we start off with actually seeing our properties. I'm going to include all of those. 4 and 3, this one's got a little bit larger square footage. I'm actually going to just go down here to this one instead. It looks like that's good. That's good. Yeah. And I'm also going to choose some from our for sale options. And you notice right now it's actually sorting it by proximity so we can see which one's closest. Just going to grab all of those that are closest to it. It's like all of those are at least decently within the range that I'm working with. This one actually does have a significantly smaller amount of space. I'm going to close that out. This one's huge. I'm probably not going to include that one. All right. I think I'm happy with my results. Notice it's giving me a different price range than what I was working with before. So I'm going to go to update valuation and close. This is actually going to seal up all of those comps that I had. and it's showing me my average of all the comps. I do have one final option to make adjustments to the comps, and this is going to be a little bit more subjective due to the kind of comparison that we're doing. If you guys do end up choosing that sales comparison analysis, it's going to allow for a lot more details to be changed. So you'll notice that there's actually going to be a dollar value for each of the fields here. So for instance, if there was less of one thing, so like for instance, in this case, one less bedroom, doesn't have the partial bathroom, you can actually add value to this property because there is one element that's missing. Or if this property has significantly more, let me find an example here. If we find that there's a property that has significantly higher square footage than my property, I can actually, in the sales comparison analysis, remove some value so that it's not accidentally throwing off my numbers too dramatically. So I'm going to say that this one's a little bit better. This is going to take down my value just a little bit. Let's go back to that first section here. This one's actually a little bit worse. I'm going to drag that down. It's going to improve my value. Same thing with this one and so on. So you can kind of mess with this. Again, this is all subjective, but it's going to be based on your own professional experience. If you guys don't want to mess with this at all, you guys can just leave it stock and you'll be good to go. So when we're finally done with all of our adjustments and everything, we can come down here to the results. I can change this so that it actually has a specific value. So let's say I just wanted to do 260. We'll just do 230 to 290. There we go. Save that. And it's only going to show the client the value that I provided there rather than showing them the actual numbers up here at the top. Now, once I'm done with this, I have the option here to create a report, and it's going to jump me directly into the seller's report. So same thing that you guys might have noticed earlier when we ran our search for Claremore, it ended up popping up with the option to create a report for market activity, neighborhood, or even choosing a specific school to run for the area. But in our case, whenever we clicked on the maybe properties that were for sale, we did the property report was the default. Whenever I run the comp analysis or the refined value, it's going to bring me to the seller's report option this time. Now you notice the seller's report option is actually fast. It's going to give us a huge amount of information. So I would recommend if you guys do have a seller that's actually trying to put their property on the market, make sure that you go through and find out how many of these pages are actually going to be relevant to them. So like, for instance, my favorite to remove on here is actually the market activity, because this shows them everything that's happening in the area. This is a bulk of the pages that this is going to be including. And this market activity section has an option to choose between 4 and 8 properties. So even just decreasing it down to 4 properties is going to help me improve the length of this so that it's not too much information. I'm going to remove this about RPR. And then down here at the very bottom, I'm going to personalize this a little bit. John Sellers. Hello. Here's your CMA. And I'm going to email this to them. There we go. And I can also have CC myself if I needed to and run the report. Now, interestingly enough, even though I am running this report and it's going to be emailing this to a client with this particular information on here, it doesn't really matter to me because I'm still going to have the option to come up here to the top and either download it from here or again, click on one of these links here and it's going to be bringing me to the same page where I can see the reports that I've created. Now, I kind of have lingered on pages here and I haven't really illustrated the fact that whenever you guys are done with creating a report, you do have the option to just leave. So you can actually just dive right out of the system. Even if I have this one set to do download, if I actually have like my computer crash or anything like that, it won't matter. It's all being created on here. So when we can jump back into RPR, I can jump back to any of my saved listings that I have, any of the recent properties I've viewed, any of the notes that I've added, or even the reports that I've created. So I can jump right back into that property report, seller's reports, anything that I've created. So I think we did leave off a couple pieces of information, primarily just the map search. I did want to jump into the map search real quick. If you guys go to research and then map search, the map search is really cool because it keeps all of the filter options that you guys have from before. So everything that you guys might need to narrow down your search by. So the same thing as if you guys are working in Matrix. And then if you want to draw a specific area, you just use the draw tools the same way that we have for Matrix, where there's a freehand, radius, polygon, or box. If I wanted to search for everything within this particular half-mile radius, I can search this area. And again, it's going to remember all of the details that I provided up here at the top. So when I run that search, it's only going to provide me the options in that area. Oh, and in this case, it looks like I found none, just poor planning on my part. But that's about it. I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm going to pull up that seller's report so you guys can see what it looks like. If you guys would like to stick around and ask any questions, we can go ahead and answer those for you. But thank you guys again for joining us. Oh, yep. And see, remember I mentioned earlier that we switched from 4 to 8 properties. Notice how dramatically that decreased it. Now, instead of it being somewhere around 80 pages, if I scroll down here to the market activity sections, you notice that it's only showing me 4 of each category. So there's all the actives. Now we're going to see all of the pending 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then now it's going to show us closed and so on. I like that one. That's pretty. So yeah, but that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining us again. If you do have any other questions, go ahead and ask those now. Otherwise, you guys can always give us a call, or as we mentioned already, there is a help section up at the top here where we've got a 24/7 phone number that's specifically for RPR's staff. And there's also a live chat and a training area where they have just tons and tons of information about anything and everything that you guys could ever need to know about RPR. All right. We're not seeing any hands pop up or any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and put the music back on. And if you guys have anything, I'm going to leave the session open until about 11:05. But thank you guys so much for joining us. And I hope to see you guys in future training.